Go right back to bed.
Okay, we are live.
Okay, good evening, or good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're at. Truly a pleasure to sit side by side with Sgt Scott Kivet, good friend, dear officer in the Robbinsville Police Department, and we're looking forward to an educational, interesting, enjoyable discussion on the silent pandemic, and I will allow Sgt Kivet to give us more details into that. But I just want to give you a very, very brief introduction, because I know you want to hear from Sgt Kivet more than you want to hear from me tonight. But last year, JLI, the Jewish Learning Institute, the host of tonight's event, put out a course called Crime and Consequence. And the idea was to take a good hard look at our justice system and compare it to that of the Torah, the values and the morals that the Torah dictates when it comes to treating people who may be doing things that are inappropriate. And as a rabbi about to deliver that course to my community and other communities, I felt what better way is there to prepare myself for than to see the perspective of the officers who are doing this day in and day out. Now, Sgt Kivet and I have been friends before that, but I never really looked closely at his work. And as I prepared for the class by joining him on patrol, by talking with him, by having him share with me valuable insights, stories, ideas, I started realizing that we actually have so much more in common than you would actually believe. A rabbi and a sergeant sitting side by side may seem in worlds apart, but there is so much that we have in common, and there's so many ideas that we would discuss sitting on the side of the highway in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., and learning from each other. And I'll let Sgt Kivet go through some of those details.
He's a good partner in crime, no pun intended. No pun intended.
Well, it was pretty quick that I had to learn if I wanted to stay in the car, then I had to become friends with Quori, his K9 friend. So they're on the side of the highway. Sgt Kivet's at the call, and there I am sitting with a K9. So I had to become friends really quickly because otherwise I'd be on my own. So that was really a powerful moment. The idea that struck me is one word: help. We are both here to help others, and that has been something that has happened at all times of day and all times of night. I'll wake up with a schedule thinking that it's going to be a routine day in my day, and that can be interrupted with calls to the hospital and calls to the station as well. And and hopefully we'll hear more about what that means practically. And the same thing, Sgt Kivet as well, a routine day on patrol. There's no such thing as a routine day on patrol, because what you expect or what you think you're about to start off with might very rapidly change. In fact, education is a very important part of his work. He's on call right now, but because it's so important to talk about this topic during his shift, he's joining us as well. So we appreciate that. And Sgt Kivet has dedicated his life from his youth to helping others. And I want you, please, Scott, if I could call you Scott for the rest of the evening.
My mom calls me Shmuel.
Shmuel, right. So when we moved to town, I had a son. My second son is Shmuel. And we come to the police department to say hi because we heard that there's a nice Jewish officer here. And I hear someone calling me, "Hey, Bubala, what's going on? I'm the only Shmuel here." And I said, "Not anymore. Here's the other Shmuel." So we definitely built that friendship on a more professional level as I learned his work as well. So please, Scott, please give us and the audience a little bit of the helping mentality that you grew up with even before you started in the police department.
Sure. So I always grew up wanting to care. Like I enjoy the job. I love the job as every day it's consistently inconsistent. But most importantly, I do what I like to do is protect and serve everyone, no matter what race, class, gender, zip code they are. I'm dealing with somebody different every day, and I enjoy helping. I always, when I was growing up, and I'll give a little reference to my good friend Frank Goodman. He would call me a good mensch, you grow up with good moral standards and doing good things, and I always believed in that. I believed in that, and that's why I got into helping people. At a young age, at 16, I became an EMT and a volunteer firefighter, and to this day, as much as my wife, I compete with time with my wife and the kids, I always will still give back to the community as a volunteer firefighter and an EMT. But what serves me, I think, a real big purpose with me as a police officer is what's going on now with the epidemic. and more specifically, opioids and opiates.
Right. So the title of tonight's session is really the silent pandemic. Why is it a silent pandemic?
See, as I kind of like what I was talking about, it doesn't matter what culture, faith, race, class, zip code, how much paycheck you get. It affects everybody. I mean, look at Robbinsville. This is Robbinsville. Robbinsville is a beautiful community. Robbinsville sits between the center point in New Jersey, between Philadelphia and New York City, which has highways goes through it, but the average median, it's not. You're not having people, with all due respect, sleeping on the train bridges here. It's a beautiful community, but it is. Although there's highways, it's most of our I hate to say business, but there's people in town and surrounding towns that are plagued with this epidemic, and people are dying every day. And unfortunately, they're coping with stress and coping with problems in their life with addiction and substance abuse. And this is not smoke and mirrors, people. This is serious business. This is when you're in too deep, you're in too deep. And where do you turn? Where do you turn when you have nothing else in life because you're sucked in too deep with this substance? So this is where we're going to kind of really talk about and how the faith community and all these bridges that we have to gap to really do what's right for the community.
So you mentioned that this is a pandemic, narcotics, drug abuse, addiction is something that doesn't care about race, religion, and anything like that. In a way that's confidential, keeping people's confidentiality. Can you paint that brush for us on some of the patrols that you've been on and what you've seen tragedy in communities that maybe not the stereotypes?
Let me tell you a quick story to really understand how serious this is. About 8 years ago, I pulled over a car, and again, what my job is called drug addiction. I stop drugs from getting point A to point B, and it doesn't matter. It could be like Friday, we had 16 bricks of heroin. A half hour before I go, Rabbi, blah blah blah, I just got a pound of meth. It's there. I'm in a locality where I do drug addiction. I also have a good resource. Quori, come here. Up. Okay, that's my partner in crime, my four-legged partner. So going to the topic of drug addiction, what I do every day is I get drug arrests, but it's not throwing people in jail. It's not about throwing people in jail. There's people that have substance abuse, that are personal use, that are addicted. So the story that I have is about 8 years ago, driving a car, and it's important to understand what I do. I look for change in driving behavior. I don't even have a radar in my car. The computer is to tell my dispatcher, hey, do you want coffee? I don't look up plates or do any of that stuff. I look for body behavior, and I'll talk a little bit more into moral, amoral, and immoral activity. But I look for change in driving behavior and violations subsequent to how they react when they see me. I pull over a car that reacts off me, sees me, slams on their brakes, not speeding, slamming the brakes, going to the right lane, about to get off the exit because they see me, and it's an intimidating thing. And what I do is, and the Rabbi has written me multiple times, talk to people like human beings, but they'll exhibit body behavior, and it'll add to something called suspicion, and it builds to reasonable and well-grounded and probable cause, or wherever it be. Long story short, I had these kids, and they're not young kids like 17-year-old. They're 22-year-old, 23-year-old kids. One is about to go in the Naval Academy. I'm talking, we use this expression, squared away, handsome kid, beautiful girl in the passenger seat. Long story short, they both had heroin in them. And I just understand, I'm like, you're not a person, again, that is homeless. You're not a person that is disheveled clothes. You're classy people from a classy area. What are you doing? And they wouldn't really answer me. And I have a good way of communicating with people. When they talk and they say, listen, you just wouldn't understand. So that was a Tuesday. The following Tuesday, I pull the same car over. And what do you think? After arresting somebody for personal use drugs, specifically heroin, you would think they would know better, right? But it doesn't work that way with this drug of heroin or opioids. So I asked them, I said, can I get you help? Can I figure something out for you? The male says, absolutely, I need it. I can't believe it. My life is ruined. I'm supposed to leave for the Naval Academy. I mean, this kid is just perfect resume. And I got him help, and I just went through some group that I thought I knew, and then they did a fantastic job and got him help. And then the female goes, I can't help. I don't need help. And I'm like, why would you just let me get you help? Because there's not helping. And what she does, she takes her beautiful hair off, and there's a huge scar that goes all the way down. She had a brain tumor and surgery and got addicted to pills. The following Tuesday, I got a call from Woodbridge Police Department. And they said, hey, you locked up this girl twice, 2 Tuesdays in a row. It's the third Tuesday. I'm like, oh, you guys locked her. I guess she's going up to Newark to buy her drugs, not Trenton anymore. They're like, no, she's in a motel in Avenel, and she's dead. We just want to know what kind of stamp they had on the heroin to see if we can link it to the drug dealer. So you got to understand, I mean, it's like, that was the first time in my life I said, oh my God, I might have saved this guy's life. He would have been doing drugs with her the following Tuesday. So, that was the start of me saying, maybe we need to start doing more with this. And that led to getting everybody involved. See, everybody was doing their own thing. Hospitals did their own thing. The prosecutor's office did their own thing. The judges did their own thing. The faith-based communities did their own thing. But what we did is we organized a unified force between cultures, religious recovery coaches, the prosecutor's office to bridge all the gaps and work on getting people help. So what we do now is on personal use with this heroin and pills and addicted to heroin, opioids like Percocets, Viking, where people are addicted, we offer them help. The key thing with this drug is it's a mental illness, and not many people, they'll look at this, they'll roll their eyes and say, "I'm a person of heroin," until you have a family member that is unfortunately attached to it. And the sad thing is today, I've never heard of a family member or family that has not some sort of attachment to somebody with substance abuse, either through making a bad decision or a surgery or going to a dentist and getting addicted to pills, whatever it be. And we got to care for, like, we're all family, and we got to give everybody a chance. And we're going to get more into that, and you're going to have more questions into it. But we bridged bridged all these gaps together, and we all work together, and we get people help. And
just to jump in, the chat box is open. Share with us where you're listening from, because this, again, is the silent pandemic that spreads everywhere. So share with us your thoughts, your questions, your comments. We'll be happy to take as many as we can. Let us know where you're tuning in from and where you're watching from, so that we can get an idea of the audience and share the information, share the conversation. Let's take a step back. Mm-hmm. We talk about people wanting to help loved ones because they see something suspicious. And we'll talk about signs of that in just mm-hmm. a bit. But let's say they do know that there's a suspicion, there is a drug activity. Mm-hmm. There might be that stigma of embarrassment. How can, I'm this and this family in town, and I have such a standing in society. Mm-hmm. It would ruin my reputation, my kids' education. Mm-hmm. I'm going to try to wing it myself. I'll try to get help myself. What can you tell parents like that, caregivers in that situation? Why is that not the healthy way to go about it?
I'll give it this. My mother, she could, everybody has that gut feeling. My mother knows there's something wrong. I could talk to her on the phone. She's like, what's going on? Everybody, a family member, loved ones know when something is wrong, and you have to trust your gut feeling. Commonly with people with addiction, it's overwhelming for a family member to say, hey, they know something's up, but the most important thing is not procrastinating and not saying he'll do it or she'll do it on her own. This drug, you need to get help. It has to be professional help, and it has to sustain sobriety when you're out too. With this drug, parents commonly enable, husbands or wives enable their loved ones. And, they'll always say the line, they'll sell a dead horse and say it's going to win the Kentucky Derby, these people that are addicts. They will. They just will lie and lie because they don't want to expose themselves to that embarrassment. Yeah. So the problem is people don't know where to get help. And a big part of our job as a police officer is getting them the help. It's not throwing them in jail. There's certain people that need to be thrown in jail. Rabbi, I can't preach that enough, but I'm going to say 85%, 75% of these people have the opportunity to get help before it gets to that point where they continually get arrested like these other people. See, the disposition of this is going to jail probably using again once they get out of jail,
Right.
overdosing, or recovery. And the last one, unfortunately, is suicide.
Yeah.
We've noticed a lot of this talking to people when they say, I can't do it anymore. I don't know what to do. Nobody's doing this drug. When they're addicted, they don't want to do it anymore. They're not doing it just to get high anymore. They're doing it to survive. They're afraid of getting something called dope sick. They wake up in the morning when they're sick and their body feels like their skin is falling off them, or the worst aches and flu symptoms ever. They don't ever, want to do that. We'll get that feeling again. So they'll do anything they can. Loved ones, burglarize loved ones, burglarize neighbors, look for weakest links, and they'll have excuses and have the best, unfortunate lies that they'll people believe on, and people enable them, even though they're gut. The mother, the father, the son, whatever, they all know something's up. But the problem is they're not going to the right people to get help. Yeah. And they need that. They need to do interventions.
And I think one of the most powerful elements of you as a police officer having these conversations is that it takes away that stigma that if I go to someone to tell about a concern I have, that I'm just getting my son or daughter or loved one locked up in jail. And by showing the public that actually that's not your intention, and that the narrative is changing, that you're there to help and to find rehabilitation, I think that will also change the narrative on the street that I can't go to law enforcement, or I can't get the proper help because I'm digging a grave, God forbid, for my own child, my own loved one. So that's powerful. And on the topic of education, that's something that you believe in greatly, because the education of it for the youth is really the best step to make sure it doesn't happen.
Understanding. Yeah.
So I know you do presentations in schools and you talk to kids. Can you walk us through what that is? What are you teaching kids? What are you telling them? How are you describing to them the danger of it and what they can do if there's a problem? And also on a lighter side, what does your demonstration look like? You have a good time with that and cars.
Yeah. So I have two different stages. What I do is I talk about what I am is a stipulated drug recognition expert. So what I'll do is I look at clinical indicators indicative to ingesting specific drugs, specifically heroin, constricted pupils, to lower body temperature. I mean, it's anything from blood pressures to temperature checks. We could formulate a well-grounded suspicion that somebody is on a drug. So I can't teach that to people. That's a lot of experience and training that I'd still to this day, I mean, I feel like I'm an expert, not master. I mean, there's people that are prescribed this stuff that could offset it. But what I do is I talk about that and say how you could lie to me as much as you want, but clinical indicators don't lie. Eyes don't lie. But then what I do is I bring in people with success stories of people that may have some sort of attachment to something in common with these kids, these young adults, either be depression or whatever it be. And these people are the popular people that were in school, to the people that are maybe socially to the right a little bit, when everybody was to the left. But we try to match everybody's personality, and they can talk about their stories and how they have gotten addicted to drugs, either maybe making a bad choice or a surgery or something like that, and they get addicted. And we talk about how we could outreach and get them help, and how there has to be trust, and how we could get them through this. And that's what we really do. It opens a lot of kids' eyes, especially when you see these people like, they show pictures of them now they're in high school or in college.
What type of feedback have you gotten from high school kids after these?
Fantastic. I mean, I go in there, they all want to see the dog, but you know what? At the end of it, their eyes are open and say, wow, we're not talking a bag of marijuana. We're not talking sipping whiskey out of their parents' cupboard, or Manischewitz, let's say, just drinking a little too much Manischewitz. We're talking about the severity of this type of drug, and it is a scare factor. It is when they hear personal stories, they open their eyes.
Right. Talking about the dog, I know you put Kari to a challenge every time you do that. What does that look like?
I mean, it's great. I mean, his nose is 500 times better than mine. So what I see, he smells. So we're a good team.
So what do? You get them into that gym, and I know you hide something.
Yeah, we come. What we'll do is we'll say, hey, listen, we'll have an auditorium full of 800 kids in a high school, and I say, hey, listen, we need 3 people. 3 people raise their hand. I'm like, you come over here, and I'll take cotton. and I'll take cotton that was with drugs in a container like this, put drugs in there, and the cotton absorbs the odor. So it's not really the drugs. I'm not bringing drugs to the school. It doesn't go out very well when you say that to parents. But I take the cotton with the odor, and I say, hey, listen, I'm going to step out of the room. You throw some pieces of cotton, hide it in this auditorium. And here's Quori, I call him the illustrious Tushy Monster. The illustrious Tushy Monster goes in. I give him the word to search. And within 4 minutes, he clears out a whole auditorium.
Wow.
I mean, his nose is so good. To give an example, his mother sniffs out ovarian cancer for University of Pennsylvania. That's how good their nose is, So, he's a good source and tool to have. So people know, don't mess around. And, when you're pulled over and there's drugs in the car, they're going to find it,
What's the best find that you've seen Quori do on a call?
Oh God, this Friday we just got 16 and a half bricks of heroin, just before we up to close to a pound of meth, which meth is not big in this area, but it's trafficking through here. So
what are the chances that Quori's going to miss something? No,
he doesn't miss anything. He doesn't miss anything.
Right.
I mean, he might have gas one day and might take him a little slower, but besides that, I mean, he's trained to do. That's his job.
Right. And he's your partner, so you.
I mean, he has two jobs. He sleeps under my 9-month-old crib, Charlotte.
Well,
but
good protection there.
Yeah.
that's and you've been involved because of your partnership with Quori. You've been involved with bigger outside the state situations, and I know there was a big one recently. A couple months
Quori got
ago.
actually last year Quori got the largest drug seizure. The seizure means like a collection of drugs in American history, $1 billion of cocaine. But that's easy, if he gets, when he finds cotton, I'm more impressed with that. But this was a cargo ship, at the Packer Seaport in Philly.
So you were called in.
Yeah, he gets called all over the place. We've done FBI cases, Homeland Security cases. And those cases are big, and we have 80 bricks of heroin, machine gun, and 3 handguns. 2 years ago, we had in a hidden compartment in a clean, beautiful car.
Wow.
My largest drug arrest was a 79-year-old person that I did on a cold stop. When I tell you this trafficking, you don't pull over a car that's doing 90 miles per hour. A 90 person doing 90 miles per hour, maybe drunk, but they're not transporting loads of drugs.
Sure.
You pull over that person that's doing 50 miles per hour and a 65 mile per hour.
So I want to get into that a little bit because one of in my conversations with Sergeant Kivet, just throughout our time, not even on patrol, we had spoken a bit about, his approach, his method, how he interacts with people, because ultimately policing does have a lot to do with communication skills. And he mentioned to me something that always caught my attention, and that was that my most powerful weapon is my mouth. There he is standing with all his gear. You can see only half of it now. There's a lot more. And I was interested by that because as a rabbi, I'm using my mouth a lot. I'm communicating with people. That's what we do. Judaism places a great emphasis in the power of speech, and we make a promise. It has binding powers in the Torah. So that always fascinated me. And that I got to see firsthand. What did he mean by that? Like a police officer using their mouth. To me, that never added up. It sounded good, but I didn't see it. So please, can you walk us through I guess no traffic stop is routine, but walk us through that. What's your process? What's your method that you're doing, and how are you making sure the situation is de-escalating and not escalating?
Art of conversation. Art of conversation is key. You got to talk to people like human beings. I mean, you'll see people, and what I do is evaluate body behavior.
Well, let's start from when you're on the side and you need to make the stop. So what are you doing from the first step of your traffic stop?
Meaning when I pulled them over.
Yeah, before. What are you looking out for, and what?
Well, like this, I don't look for. Again, I don't use radar. I just don't believe in speeding tickets. I believe in just the way people react and see. It's going to get into. I guess I could talk a little bit about it, but see, moral people. There's 3 types of people. There's moral people. There's immoral people, and there's amoral people. But commonly, 95% of the people are moral people that commit immoral acts. So the moral people are making a bad judgment call. It could be transporting a lot of drugs, or it could just be personal use. But regardless of a dime bag in a car or a kilo in a trunk, people react the same way when they're a moral character. Again, that's 95% of the people. 95% of the people will exhibit nervous body behavior. And some people are nervous Nellies and have anxiety, and some people might be prescribed marijuana for the purpose of that's the only thing that calms them down. But what I look for is somebody that's doing 50 miles per hour in a 60-mile-per-hour zone. Sees me, slams on a brake, and then gets off the interstate, or goes into a quick check, or goes into whatever, tries to avoid me. And that doesn't mean they're, sir, get out of the car, get on the ground, give me your drugs. It's not like that, you know. It's
Sure.
But you go up to a car and talk to them like a human being. And remember, there's so many stories I'd love to talk about when you were riding with me and you've seen it firsthand, and it's just trying to explain it to the untrained eye or the untrained ear. But talking to people like human beings, they shouldn't be nervous. And I commonly, when somebody's nervous, I'll say, hey, stop, time out, relax. Let's get out of the car. I'll get them out of the car. And the first thing I'll do is, and they look at me kind of like how my dog will look at me. You know, they tilt their head like, you know, but I'll tell them and say, hey, listen, on the count of 3, this is what I want you to do. We're going to do it together. Count of 3, I want you to take a deep breath. 1, 2, 3. And what I want to do is I want to evaluate them. I want to evaluate, are they the nervous Nancy or the nervous Nellie, or are they the person that's nervous for a reason? Is Jimmy Hoffa? Are we going to finally find Jimmy Hoffa in the trunk of a car? You know, or is it because there is drugs in the car? You know what I mean? And a moral person that commits an immoral act, and I'll get into that right now. Moral people are you and I. Moral people are people that go out and have a good time on a Friday, Saturday night. Then there's moral people that commit immoral acts. And guess who that is? That's me. That's you. That's 95% of the people. That's the people that might have had a little too much Manischewitz and wake up in the morning and with a headache and say, what was I thinking? Why did I drive home that night? Now, the purpose is not to be totally, I don't believe in the law. I don't think laws apply to me. It's a bad judgment call. That's a moral person that commits an immoral act. Now, take that moral person that had too much Manischewitz and sees a cop car and realizes, oh my God, did I have too much Manischewitz? And I'm using Manischewitz because I think we're all in the same audience right here that could understand that. But what they'll do is they'll react to you, and they will react towards seeing a marked petroleum. And I hate to use the word predator prey because I like it's all perception, especially in these days and ages, how we talk to people, how we act. You have to be better than what people's opinions are. So I talk to people like human beings. And then what I'll do is I'll look at the stuff like I talked about, clinical indicators indicative to specific drugs. And drug, believe it or not, alcohol is a drug. It's a CNS depressant that will have the same clinical indicators as a Xanax or something like that. But long story short, I'll look at clinical indicators. I'll look at the totality of the circumstances and try to calm people down. And speaking to people like human beings, there's a lot of times that they'll want to connect with you because they're just so filled with anxiety. I think it's Tell Hard. There's a book of it. It's about a person that unfortunately killed his wife and buried him underneath the floor. And the detectives are asking just basic questions like, "Hey, where is she?" It's a missing person report, and he starts hearing a dun 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 dun, and it gets louder and it gets louder. And he's finally, after these questions, simple questions, he's like, "All right. I buried her underneath the floor." And all they were was basic questions. But what that is his heart rate and his anxiety. And as soon as he admitted that he did that crime, he was perfectly calm. And that's what these people are. And what I try to do is I use that tactic to explain to people, listen, people make mistakes. People make bad judgment calls. You're a moral person that commits an immoral act. Now, there's the amoral person. Moral people that commit immoral acts, and then there's the amoral people. These are the people that don't care about anybody. These are the sociopaths. These are the Jeffrey Dahmers. These are the persons that they could have, in Jeffrey Dahmer's case, a slave young 15-year-old or 14-year-old boy that he kidnapped, and the kid, when he went to a grocery store, the kid escaped his house and he was bleeding and a mess, and people called the police officers, and these 2 police officers are talking to him and like, oh my God, this is real. And Jeffrey Dahmer goes to them and say, oh, no, he's just drunk, and grabbed on his arm and said, oh, officers, I'll take care of this. I am so sorry. And the officers believed it because Jeffrey Dahmer is a sociopath. He's an arrogant sociopath that could convince anybody. And that's only 5% of people. It's very dangerous.
Yeah. And that's not.
So
routine.
the 95% of the people that I deal with that I can help are moral people that commit immoral acts, either them being in too deep with drugs or just making a bad decision.
And moving it along, and I think this, what you're saying is very, very powerful. How has being Jewish affected the way you look at situations, the way you look at your job as a police officer? What impact does your religion, your Jewish religion, have on you on a day-to-day basis during your traffic stops and your intervention help?
Got to answer for you. And what comes up to my head all the time is, listen, I don't go to temple every day. I consider myself Jewish. But every year we go to Yom Kippur, right? And what does Yom Kippur say? Yom Kippur, the whole principle, the way I recollect it, is that we all are not perfect. And either however you want to say or testify or say to God or the rabbi what you have done wrong or what things that may have been not have been perfect in your life, you're asking for forgiveness. It's your once a year that you ask for forgiveness to say, I'm not perfect, God. And, I in life, I kind of say, this is not karma. This is not negotiating with God. It's not, but it's just, we make mistakes. And when I think of Yom Kippur and I make a car stop, I got to look at people as human beings, that people make mistakes. And I got to decipher, are you a moral person that committed an immoral act? Either being knowingly and willingly or just a mistake. I always say there's two types of mistakes. There's a mistake from the heart and a mistake from the brain. Purposely knowingly and willingly do it. A mistake from the heart, or there's I'm trying to think of the expression, but there's two types of, it's a mistake from the mind, mistake from the heart. You purposely do this, but regardless, 95% of people just, understand they do something wrong. But when dealing with that 95%, I could think of that Yom Kippur almost every day and say, people make mistakes. And that's how I treat things and treat people. And it's been very successful.
It's incredibly powerful. The idea of God can forgive and always looks to forgive, then we can, at least, of course, if it's not a danger and there's a way to help. And even when you're dealing with somebody who is doing something wrong, there's a way to treat them as a human being.
Do you remember when you rode with me? Okay, all right. So the rabbi rides with me, and time to time, and every time, two things. A, the dog licks his beard for a matzah brai, and he likes that, But no, I'm joking. But we always get a drug arrest. Those are the two things we get. But we'll go out there and we talk, and we get to talk about life. And there's a violation. That's what I'm looking at, Rabbi. And he actually will call out that violation, saying, "Yeah, that doesn't seem right." And we'll ask questions, and we'll let him go. Because it could be a nervous Nelly or just somebody just was on a cell phone and reacted, that way. Third or fourth stop, or maybe the first stop, maybe the 20th stop, there's going to be something that throws out red flags and the nervous body behavior. So this car stop, we stopped, right? And it was a family, it was a van, not my typical, it's not your typical car. It's not the car with the loud mufflers and flying 9 miles per hour. It's a caravan filled with kids. Yeah, it was 3 or 4 kids. A husband and wife, and there were red flags, and we got him at the husband out of a car. And what I did is I did my speech. I'm like, "Hey, bro, relax. I'm just trying to get you out of here, but just make me feel that everything's okay, because right now the way you're reacting, you're nervous, you're sweating. It's cold out. Relax." And it was coming down to where it's a point where listen, there's something big in this car, regardless if there's 4 kids in the car. So I went to say, "Hey, listen, if you can't relax, you're making me nervous. I'm going to put you in handcuffs and detain you in handcuffs." And he wasn't relaxing. So I get one handcuff on and bam, off he goes. He jumps over the guardrail, and it's a foot pursuit. And we get him under arrest after getting trapped in a vine thing. I had all cuts all over us, but got him out. And guess what? Did I talk to him like a jerk? No. I sat him down. What the deal is.
And you're skipping one part. There's kids in the car.
Perception.
The father is doing something wrong, but there's kids who are going to grow up, and this is something that is going to stick with them. And the way you dealt with those kids, maybe for you that was routine.
But remember we said we deputized the kids. I'm like, kids. I know there was an 8-year-old boy, but there was young kids that were like, they see what's going on.
2 younger ones, yeah. And what did you do that?
I deputized the 8-year-old, right? I said, hey, I need you. This is what I need you. I need your help.
That's right.
I want you to be the big brother. Daddy's going to be okay, but I need you to step up and be the man of the family. It was like maybe a 10-year-old, and there was younger kids. So the kid was he felt so cool that he was helping. I swore him in. I go, state your name. And he says, state your name. I'm like, no, your real name. And I swore him in, and he watched over the kids. Long story short, it was pounds of drugs in the car. And the outcome was not, it was a sad situation, but it's the perception of the kids and how they looked at the police. And that's how I like to run the day to
And
day.
he always leaves out the end of the story.
Oh, when I came back to my car, it's all fogged up, and I don't know, was it because I didn't use the dog? I don't know if it was the rabbi going, or the dog going. The whole car was steamed up, and I opened the door, and he's always been.
But there we are, and escorting the wife and the kids back to the station for processing and everything. And as we pull in, Sergeant Kivet goes over the radio and says, hey, is anyone available to go over the road and get these kids some food because they didn't have dinner? And that was something that I'll never forget. It was that moment of humanity, of treating somebody as a human being, as the family, not blaming the kids for something that they have absolutely no control over, the mess that they were caught in. And to me, that was an extremely powerful moment. But as someone who's doing this on a day-to-day basis, I would assume that some stories are pushed back to the back burner, to the back of your memory, but there must be one or two instances that just live with you every day. There's a face that you just can't push away. Would you feel sharing this with a story like
the
that?
worst is death notifications.
From drugs or in general?
Just in general, just telling family, loved ones that somebody passed away. It kills me inside because I recollect the day that my father passed away from a traumatic injury, and seeing my mother, it haunts me. It's my best friend, first of all, passing away. And when somebody passed away, they pass away. There's nothing that you could do about it. But the repercussions of somebody passing away haunts you forever because they're hurting. And if you're a mensch, or a person like yourself and good people, sometimes I call it like a life extension. You feel their pain, and it's terrible. I always tear up. And actually, to be honest, the best thing that I could do is really call a chaplain. And the faith, the answers. I don't have the answers to everything, to the questions. And I'll never forget the day of my dad passing away. Rabbi Levy, Monroe Township, New Jersey, Central New Jersey. I see him a couple times a year for religious faith, important holidays, as I would say. But to see him personally come to my house and speak to my mother and hug me and love me and support me and answer my questions, it is the most important factor, extension that could have been extended to me. So we start this chaplain program, and I'll just give a good little story. I mean, there's so much training experience a police officer has. You're supposed to be the tools of all trades, right? But 2 weeks ago, we have a chaplain program here, and Rabbi is one of them. And I wasn't working this day, but
Sergeant Kivet pushed me to do it.
Yeah,
Pushed me to take that training and stressed upon me the value it has. And I want, we'll talk more about that soon. But for the story,
the story is that there was a young adult, or middle. That was a middle age. I wasn't working that day, but we got a call for a person that was pacing on a bridge, and he's going back and forth. And the guys didn't need to be a detective to say he was Jewish because he had a yarmulke on. And they seen him, and they wouldn't talk to him. I'm sorry, they wanted to talk to him, but he wouldn't talk to them. And he was pacing. He was going to commit suicide. He was going to jump off that bridge, and he just needed answers to questions. And that's where they called in the rabbi. Tatala came in, Bubala came in, and he did what he does best, what rabbis do best. They answer the questions to the best of their training experience in life and faith. And that person's here today. Not here today in this physical room, but talked off the ledge, pun intended. And I'll talk about these death notifications. These death notifications is like, there's so much I could say. I could share my personal story, that how I felt post-traumatic stress from my father passing, but they want that faith. They want that almost liaison with God, that everything's going to be okay. What we're hurting for the person that's hurting, that's emotionally disturbed over what happened. But yet what they are is they're overwhelmed with feelings and emotions, and they can't talk to somebody anymore because they're not there anymore. And they use that connection, the rabbi, the liaison with God, to get that message across. And everything's going to be okay when that rabbi's there, or when that priest is there, or whatever faith-based they are behind.
Moving back to the narcotics and
sorry, I go a little bit all over. Sometimes if I'm looking to the left, he's telling me to slide, steal third and go home. I'm like talking too much. I'm very passionate about the job.
That's good. Many in the medical profession are saying that yes, the outward, danger and health crisis with COVID-19 is there, but there's a lurking one under the surface that may not have even exposed itself fully. Many in the medical field are predicting and have seen an uptick in all these things: suicide, narcotics. From your perspective, what have you seen, or have you seen a change in
COVID? Since COVID, I have to tell you, I was very concerned about the opioid and opiate addiction and substance abuse before COVID. I am scared right now. No exaggeration, no smoke and mirrors. I am scared about our future and people right now, because where they need to sustain sobriety, people that may have been addicted to drugs, there's no NA meetings. Who's going to go on Zoom to do NA? And then maybe people might, but they need that personal relationship with those groups. I have seen more overdoses in the last 3-4 months, or relapses, than I've ever seen before. And with the drug of the opioid and opiate, what happens is they use the drug to purge their stress. And there's no more stress now than ever, is more stress now than ever before. People are losing their jobs. People, are laid off. People are losing family members. People are in their houses. Domestic violence is on it's skyrocketed. The repercussions of this virus is not just people passing away from the virus or getting sick. There's so much subsequent attachments to this, from the stock market losing money, whatever it be. Yeah. And I'm seeing so much with drug and substance abuse right now. It's out of control. It is out of control.
Right. Wow. So what can you tell parents, caretakers, lovers? What can they look out for? What are things, we spoke about earlier, not trying to, easier said than done, but pushing away the shame and the embarrassment and going for help. But that's once they know there's a problem. But sometimes there are situations going on without the parents recognizing it, without a caretaker recognizing it. What are some of the most basic telltale signs that you can tell people?
Depression, the obvious signs of depression, sleeping. I'm not going to get in clinical indicators of it, but you could see somebody and say, wow, they don't look good. And commonly it's because of substance abuse, erratic behavior, constant lies, hiding, sleeping. There's so many different symptoms. When I tell you, you don't have to be a detective or a doctor or a rabbi to identify substance abuse. You need to trust your intuition, your gut, especially when you're a loved one. Most importantly is when you know something's up, you have to go to the right people to get help. There's people that shoot from the hip and say, oh, I think I'm a social worker, I can do this. And it doesn't work that way. There's trained and certified recovery coaches that you need to reach out to. And if you don't know to reach out to, you need to know to go to your local police department and ask them, because they have ties to it. Right. So what it's called is an intervention. So we have the program I told you, the community addiction recovery effort. When we lock somebody up for the drugs, substance abuse, and the drugs, the personal use, whatever it be, they're not, I'm not going to send them to jail on that, but they're not going to learn a lesson. And there's a times period tomorrow's too late. They need an intervention immediately. So what I do is when I arrest them, I talk to them. I say, listen, I know you don't want to do this. And they are upset. They don't want to do this anymore. Even if it's the first time getting arrested or the 10th time getting arrested, they are depressed. And you have to, unfortunately, take advantage of that time to get an intervention, have the right people to talk to them. And what I do is I get these recovery coaches. Again, we bridge in all gaps from prosecutor's office, recovery coaches. But these people are past people that were suffered from substance abuse. They're in recovery. They come down and they talk to them and they say, I know what you're going through. And we'll get them a rehab. It doesn't matter if they have insurance or not. We'll get them into a rehabilitation. And there's multiple tiers to this. There's steps on this. What happens is they'll go to rehab. And then they'll come home and they'll come back to a similar stressful environment. But they have to attach themselves. Once they learn recovery, they have to sustain sobriety. And sustaining sobriety, they have to attach themselves to something. And commonly, it's faith-based. People will, you see these movies, they come out of jail and they have the Bible, right? They're attached to the Bible. But commonly, what I'll do is, teach them. I'm not the most religious person in the world, but people will go towards faith. And when they're stressed out, they go towards faith, speak to the rabbi, go to temple, feel good about themselves. And sustaining sobriety is commonly talking to God, praying.
Yeah, and that's interesting because people ask me, and they know about our relationship, and even tonight, what are we talking about? And the response that I'm giving is that this is a full circle. We're all here to help, and everyone in their own way. There's the trained recovery coaches, there's the medical professionals, there's the police officers who are doing their part, and there's the rabbis doing the religious part, or a chaplain, every faith according to their tradition. And because we're all ultimately focused on one goal, and that is helping this individual, it is so important that we're all on the same page. And that's why constant communication with everybody in this field is number one priority, because what I'm saying might be from my perspective as a rabbi, and what you're saying is from your perspective as a police officer, but there's a way that we can all have those conversations with those struggling in a way that is guiding them in the same direction, and no one is pulling them backwards in the wrong way.
This drug is so controlling up here that I'll give you, for instance, so what we do is we'll do commonly once we arrest somebody, we get them into recovery and they sustain. What we want to do is sustain sobriety. So they'll always get arrested and they're getting charged. But instead of going to jail, they're going to recovery, and I want them to see them sustain recovery. So the worst thing you could do is them coming out of rehab and then say, okay, now you have to go and answer to the judge about this, and they get hammered, losing their license 2 years, getting a criminal record. So we do something called conditional discharge or pretrial intervention, or some kind of conditions that if they sustain sobriety and show that they have employment or attached to a faith base or whatever it is that they can convince that they're sustaining sobriety, we'll have a certain amount of time where they pretty much graduate from that charge, and we'll dismiss the charge or lower it to, again, the last thing we want to do is sweep their legs underneath. And then, this drug is so specific controlling up here that if you sweep their legs from underneath them, they'll relapse just like that. I worry that they lose a family member and they relapse like that. There has to be some kind of attachment for them to come to, almost an everyday sponsor, not just a person, but a way of life. I told you that story at the beginning, right? About the girl that passed away, right? And the guy, we got help, was in the Naval Academy.
And he got into the Naval Academy.
Yeah, it was just a whole big thing. But what happened? His best friend, who was this person that he talked to all the time, that was in sobriety with him, that was keeping him sober, relapsed and overdosed. And who would think that he couldn't deal with the stress? My first person I ever saved their life, that he relapsed and took the same heroin that kid took. And then next to my Miranda card, to tell people to understand that I'm serious, is his in loving memory of card. He passed away. And I think about that and understand that getting somebody help is just only half the battle. But sustaining sobriety is more important. Yeah, so that's why I hope you could come in.
That stays with you.
Oh, it crushes me, you know. And
That card is with you every
I speak to
day.
the family, and you know, and they thank me for several, 6-7 years of holidays and birthdays and loving memories afterwards. But ultimately, he's gone because of the drug, and that drug will never leave you. Once you're an addict, unfortunately, and you're in too deep, you'll always be an addict. But you have to control that demon, the inner demon, that you have to sustain that sobriety.
Right.
And Rabbi, I talk about this, and we talk about this, and you understand if it's not faith-based, they have to find something to sustain that sobriety. I say sustain 10 times. I must have said it 5 times, 50 times, but it's important.
And that's why I'm passionate about it, because what you're saying, this idea of, as you said, yes, according to the law, according to the books, they're going to be charged. They should be charged. Everyone would agree, and there's no debate. But the ability to look at the individual with an image of God inside of them and say, there's something that this person can give to the world. How can we channel that and still let that person
These
shine?
recovery coaches that come in here save people's lives every day. Yeah, I might make the arrest, I might get the connection, but they're saving lives.
And that's what I saw. And going back to what I said about the course, that this, the crime and consequence course that I was giving, that was the driving message of course, we have to make our streets safe and we have to take care of issues. But at the same time, are we just painting with a broad brush, or are we looking at individuals for what they have to offer? And I think as a rabbi coming from a Jewish perspective, this is something that we see constantly in Jewish texts and writings. And to see that modern policing is picking up on that model is a huge success, because education, going back to what we spoke about earlier, is really the key. And it's education to prevent it, but even if they're falling, we can educate them back to a place in society where they're needed and where they are useful.
If I could tell the crowd, the audience here, that we all make mistakes. Don't think you're perfect, because nobody's perfect. But we need to, and I'm glad you opened that door, that I could pretty much think about Yom Kippur. We have to forgive. There has to be forgiveness, but there also has to be action and rebuild. Don't be judgmental on this drug. People don't want to do this drug. If they have objectives in life, sometimes I look at the people that are living underneath the train bridge and I say, oh, it's too late, but it's not too late. There have to be a marked distinction in their life that they're going to one day wake up, either through being arrested or somebody just talking to them and saying the right things. Everybody deserves a chance. As long as they're that 95% of the person, that moral person that committed immoral acts, and they could still continue immoral acts, we have to, as a good Jewish faith, or just a regular, as a good citizen, a good person, not judge people.
Absolutely. So going along those lines, what can people say to someone who they know is suffering? And it's not their place to push them in one direction or another, but what are words of encouragement that you've seen successful, and that, again, unfortunately, most people know of someone somewhere along their close friends or family of someone who's done it. I know Chabad in Mercer County has done 2 overdose funerals, youngsters, in the past couple months, 2. So it's hard to ignore it. The question is, not everyone is in a position to be a leader at it, to dedicate their life to it, and that's understandable. But what are some words of encouragement or direction that somebody could say to someone they know struggling with it? They're getting the help, they're in the right place from a medical standpoint. But what are helpful, encouraging words to a loved one, to a friend?
What I would say is society understands it, and everybody's worried about what people think about themselves, right? You worry perception. Everybody thinks, what are they going to think of me? It's a judgmental world we live in. Regardless of what political party you're in, or whatever it be, or who you like, or who you want to vote for, everybody's judgmental. Everybody's guilty of being a judgmental person. But you have to understand, as human beings, that we all make mistakes, and that sometimes the message you need to get to these people, that stop with the lies. We get it. Let's get you help.
And we still love you.
We still love
who you are. But
I talked about how parents and husbands and wives enable the addiction. You can't enable the addiction. You have to accept the addiction.
Right.
The substance abuse, you have to accept. And there has to be the message across that we all have a duty to help each other.
We do.
We may not be beloved, but you're my brother, Rabbi, and we talk about that. And every neighbor, we have a duty to be there for society.
Absolutely.
And don't, too many times people call him a junkie. It's a substance abuse.
That's true. That's a label that doesn't help the process of
No, it's belittling, it's demoralizing. And yeah, they are moral people committing immoral acts, but they're human beings, and we have the opportunity to help them before it's too late. And I talked about that. Overdose, suicide.
Yeah. Many situations.
We got to get it before that. We got to intervene.
So, I mean, we're coming to the end of our hour, but if you can open up a little bit on the personal side, I mean, you see things that most people will never see, most people can't handle. What do you tell yourself? How do you cope mentally, emotionally, to keep doing it, to not let it impact you? Each case, it sounds like from what you're describing that every person becomes so emotionally attached, and you remember their face, you remember where they were, what they did. How do you cope? What's your mechanism for I know we talk a lot, and you've told me that's helpful, but what is it? How do you put yourself in your boots and your uniform?
I learned loving family. I remember being 22 years old and going out every night and having a blast, right? But when you have kids and when you have sickness in families, you start appreciating life. And if I have a bad day, I'm a grown man, but I'll be the first person to call my mother and say, "Can you come over for dinner?"
Yeah. We've done it on patrol.
Yeah. Love your kids, love your family. Understand life is life. If you don't have the questions, if you don't have the answers to the questions, I call you. But loving family and being there as family and generating memories, the positive outweighs the negative.
You stay focused on that.
Stay focused on that.
That keeps you going, keeps you motivated.
And if you don't have if family is not with you anymore, you got to find that attachment to love something.
And I know the moment that the day comes that you wake up and say this again, then you're going in the wrong direction. And I know that every time I'm speaking with you, you're motivated to help. There's that same energy every single time you're on duty, every single time you're on patrol. And I think that is an extremely important part as well, because the minute it just becomes routine, and the minute it just becomes something because, again, and you start getting fed up of it, then that's when you lose yourself. That's when you lose composure. And that's when you start making the mistakes that could come back. And
it's a domino effect, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. Because if we're not emotionally strong and we're not controlling our emotions from an intellectual standpoint, then we start making mistakes. We make calculations that are not in the best of sight.
I'm just glad now. Police work's different. Police work's about communicating and bridging the gaps. Our prosecutor's office, Mercer County Prosecutor's Office, they allow us to do this. They get it. Our faith base. I have resources I go to. The day of Superman and Batman doing them by themselves, it doesn't work out anymore. Everybody needs to play their part and be their part.
Yeah. And I think this is a message that people don't realize, until we started having these conversations. I would never have imagined that police departments are looking at the prevention and intervention and help. And I think that needs to become more of a spoken reality, because it is the way forward. How about on a positive note? Do you see a way forward? Do you see youth being more careful? And I'm not looking for you to paint a picture that isn't true, but what's your positive outlook for the future, for the next generation, knowing that this is one of the biggest, if not biggest, pandemics facing our society today?
I just hope more outreach and education and personal stories could get out there to be optimistic. Right now, it's tough out there.
Whose positive story that you can think of keeps you going in that sense? I know the other one is emotionally with you every day, but can you share with us, maybe in closing, a powerful story of someone who made it and got better, got back on their feet?
Gosh, you know what? I would like to say yes. There's many, but what I could tell you, the family members living another day with their family members is everyday story. The thanks I get from family members to keep the love going. And I'm trying to think of the right words to really get into it, but people don't really know how precious family is. And when there's somebody suffering, either through depression or substance abuse, having them get back online on the tracks with family on the same caboose, I guess, is the most important thing. And that's what keeps me going doing it.
Wow. That smiling face, that thank you, that
Yeah.
birthday, that anniversary that can be celebrated properly.
Yeah.
It's precious,
Yeah.
the value of life. And, I know you speak about your father in very personal ways. You see that every day with him, something that you're living with and missing him. So,
I still have loved ones, and every day, I mentioned my good friend Frank. He's filled a big void in my dad
sure.
and with my mother.
Right.
And it's live to love more, be positive.
So, in closing, what's your message? What would you like people to know that you don't think is known enough from your line of work?
Don't be judgmental.
Don't be judgmental.
Formulate your own opinions and forgive. Like almost every day's Yom Kippur.
Yeah, to me, that's a very powerful takeaway, that we can forgive. And I think that what we're hearing is a transition. I mean, I would never have imagined that this is the new focus of law enforcement in this area in the silent pandemic. And I think we need to make people aware that there are avenues for help in every way. And everyone has their role to play, whether it's the family members, the medical professionals, the clergy, the chaplains, the police departments, the prosecutor's office. Everyone has that way. And I think it's our job to make it not silent anymore. When a person is suffering, they need to get the help. And we need to be able to push anyone who has a role, an ability to impress logic in any way, that these people could get the help that they need. And we have to take the stigma away, because if that stigma exists, we lose lives, literally, day in and day out. So
Absolutely.
We can't be judgmental. It crosses all lines, all communities. You've told me and you've shared stories of people from the most shocking of backgrounds.
We could talk all day,
So if we could, going into the new year and the Yom Kippur, as Sergeant Kivet said so beautifully, we need to stop judging, and we need to be there for them, for that person. One of the things I've lectured a lot about recently is sympathy versus empathy. Empathy is what is needed. A person has to recognize that they've made a mistake and they need to fix it, but at the same time, you've accepted them for who they are and you're willing to work with them. It's not about sympathy, which is just pouring on the love and ignoring it, washing it away as if it doesn't exist, enabling, as you use that word. Rather, we have to be showing that empathy, that we care about them, but we care about them sometimes more than they care about themselves, more than they recognize. And I think if society is able to do that, less judgmental, more open, love, and caring, putting people in the right directions, we'll see a significant change in that. And God willing, your line of work and helping others can shift to other things as well.
Yeah. You think I was too much of a yenta today? Did I just be yapping?
Yeah, we have. That's what we do best, right? All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For those that
Thank
joined
you
us
for your
live
time.
and enjoy the recording as well. We appreciate it. And thank you so much, Sergeant Kivet, for giving us of your time and your expertise. And I know you're passionate about it. So thank you for sharing that passion with so many others as well.
Thank you for the opportunity.